This is not breaking news. This is not a scandal. This is not about one person. This is about a system that looks powerful right up until the moment it needs something it can't produce. And then, quietly, it starts to beg. Somewhere inside a chain of contracts, factories, ports, and politics, one request met one answer, a single word. And that word didn't just stop a shipment, it exposed a dependency. Because when a modern economy can't secure the tools it needs to build, it doesn't just slow down, it starts to rearrange itself. Fast, painfully, and not always in a way anyone voted for. So stay with me. Subscribe if you want the full map of how this spreads. Because the real story isn't the request. It's what the system does next. And that's where this gets dangerous. What controls the system now isn't a president. It isn't a parliament. It isn't even a market in the abstract. It's capacity. It's the small number of places on Earth that can produce certain machines, certain alloys, certain parts on time, at scale, within tolerances that make failure catastrophic. And once that capacity is booked, it becomes something more than industry. It becomes governance. Because if your roads, your grids, your factories, your mega projects depend on equipment you don't make, then your policy is just a request form. Your strategy is a delivery schedule. Your power is whether someone answers the phone. That's the frame you have to hold here. This is not a personality story. This is a supply chain sovereignty story. And once you see that, the single word refusal stops sounding rude and starts sounding like a warning. And the warning only matters because something else happened first, something slow, normalized, and incredibly easy to miss. Before, when the United States needed something industrial, metal, machinery, components, the assumption was simple. Maybe not cheap, maybe not elegant, but available. Now that assumption is gone. Because what changed wasn't one deal. It wasn't one election. It was the quiet normalization of dependence. The gradual decision over years that it was fine if the most specialized parts of modern construction and manufacturing lived somewhere else, as long as they arrived on time. And then the world stopped being smooth. You have long lead times. You have upstream components counted in the hundreds. You have machines that cost millions and can't be swapped out like brands of paper towels. And according to the material you gave me, over 68% of specialized industrial machinery used in U.S. mega projects is imported. That isn't a footnote. That's the architecture. And architectures don't fail loudly at first. They fail by slipping. They fail by minor delays that become idle crews, by temporary shortages that become permanent pricing, by a system that still looks normal until the day someone tries to jump the line. And that's exactly where this story stops being theoretical, because then comes the first visible shock, and it lands faster than people think. According to the reference you provided, the shock starts with something that sounds like a commodity story, and it is, but it's also a system story. U.S. aluminum prices surge, or 40% since June 2026. Pushing above 5,200 per metric ton. Inventories fall from 750,000 tons. At the start of 2025, it's below 300,000. Today, a roughly 60% BR collapse in 12 months. The Midwest premium hits 96 cents per pound, up 65% saw since June. That's not just a chart. That's construction schedules snapping. That's budgets rewriting themselves in real time. And the mechanism in your material is brutally plain. Canada supplies our 70% of nearly 4 million tons of U.S. aluminum imports. And Canadian suppliers stop discretionary shipments because under the 50% tariff, they're losing money. So the shortage isn't mystical. It's arithmetic. And once shortages become arithmetic, they become leverage, which is why a demand for heavy machinery, tens of billions in assets, locked into long-term contracts, with delivery timelines measured in months, not years, didn't get a negotiation. It got one word. And here's the problem. When the system can't absorb no, it looks for other ways to force yes. Because here's the hidden mechanism, and it's the part most people never see unless they're inside procurement, shipping, or trade law. Capacity is already spoken for. A high-capacity excavator, a turbine transporter, specialized industrial machines that can cost $5 million on a piece. with Hauser 12 to 24 month storage of lead time built from hundreds of upstream components. These aren't widgets. These are bottlenecks with serial numbers. So when a political actor tries to accelerate access, what they are really trying to do is override the queue, leapfrog other buyers, break the logic that keeps contracts credible. And that's why the one-word refusal mattered so much. Because if contract priority can be changed by pressure, then every buyer in the world has to assume their delivery is now political. And the minute that assumption spreads, manufacturers protect themselves, they lock down, they reprice risk, they shift to partners who don't ask them to choose between profit and precedent. And in your material, the refusal comes from Canada, described as supplying nearly 22% now of U.S. heavy industrial imports at the exact moment Canada's leverage peaks in the run-up to the July 2026 USMCA review. So the no isn't a tantrum. It's a demonstration. The system still has rules, and the rules belong to whoever controls the scarce thing. And once that's true, the consequences don't arrive in speeches. They arrive in work orders and payroll. Then the second mini-crisis hits, and it doesn't announce itself like a crash. It shows up like a calendar problem, a shipment slips, a site stalls, a crew waits. And because this system is tight, one delay doesn't stay one delay. It multiplies. In your reference, shares of several U.S. infrastructure firms dip 3% to 5% within days. Logistics insurers adjust risk premiums. Trade analysts start modeling retaliation scenarios. The construction sector, an industry that needs steady, predictable aluminum, steel, and equipment, gets the opposite: chaos, uncertainty, costs that move faster than contracts can. And the language in your material is chillingly precise. In July 2026, uncertainty has become the business model. Now think about what that means. If the system can't guarantee delivery, it can't guarantee deadlines. If it can't guarantee deadlines, it can't guarantee financing. If it can't guarantee financing, it can't guarantee jobs. And that's before anyone retaliates. That's before any formal breakdown. That's just the supply chain doing what supply chains do when they're squeezed. They become brittle. So the story isn't that someone said no. The story is what happens when no becomes contagious. And the next part is where it turns from markets to you. If you're watching this and thinking, okay, that's trade drama, that's for executives, no. This lands where you live. In the material you gave me, one delayed shipment can idle 300 to 500 workers. Not permanently, temporarily, which is how it starts. A week here, a month there. And then the quiet recalculation, the project that was supposed to break ground doesn't. A commercial build in Ohio needs aluminum framing. The price has jumped 40% in 6 months. That cost doesn't vanish. It moves. Developer to tenant, tenant to customer, customer to you. A mid-sized construction firm in Arizona is stuck on a fixed-price contract. Machinery arrives late. Penalties pile up. Margins disappear. Layoffs or bankruptcy. Not because there isn't demand, but because there isn't access. And small businesses can't absorb this. Tight bids, tight cash, no leverage. So if you want to understand why this matters, subscribe and stay with me. Because this isn't about one negotiation. It's about a system that makes your job, your rent, and your grocery bill depend on decisions made in boardrooms you'll never enter. And when the pressure moves from people to nations, it doesn't get calmer. It spreads. Now zoom out. Because the truly dangerous thing about supply chain leverage is that it doesn't stay bilateral. It teaches lessons. In your reference, European trade officials emphasize contract integrity. Asian suppliers watch for precedent, because if political pressure can reorder delivery in North America, it can happen anywhere. And the moment suppliers start believing that, they price politics into everything. That's how fragmentation begins. Not with a treaty collapsing overnight, but with quiet rerouting, quiet diversification, quiet, we can't rely on you. And your material points to the starkest signal: Canada's pivot accelerates. Prime Minister Mark Carney visits Beijing on January 12, 2026, seeking expanded trade as America becomes, in his words, no longer a reliable partner. That isn't a headline. That's a tectonic shift. For decades, Canada's economy was tightly integrated with the U.S. Now Canadian leadership is actively building alternatives. The EU reads this as a warning. Mexico recalculates. watching Canada's hard line create negotiating space. And the Brookings warning in your material is the sentence you should hold on to. Politicizing industrial supply chains accelerates fragmentation, making everything more expensive. The question isn't whether this is bad optics. The question is, what happens when every partner starts planning for the U.S. as the risk? So here we are. Cause, mechanism, consequence, acceleration, now the future. And the future in a system like this doesn't arrive as one outcome. It arrives as three plausible paths, each one shaped by the same scarce reality. You cannot demand capacity into existence. Path one is adjustment. The pressure becomes intolerable. Industry pushes back. Policy shifts. Tariffs are reduced or redesigned. Supply flows resume, not because anyone wins, but because the system can't afford the strain. The queue stabilizes. The costs stop climbing, though they don't return to what they were, and everyone quietly learns leverage has limits. Path two is erosion. No big rupture, just sustained unpredictability. Premiums stay high. Inventories stay thin. Projects get delayed, then quietly canceled. What your material calls demand destruction. Firms revise capital expenditure downward. Risk becomes permanent. The economy still functions, but more expensively, more cautiously, less confidently. And the political incentives tilt toward more coercion, not less. Path three is rupture. National security provisions get invoked, contracts get overridden, retaliation hits fast. The trade framework, USMCA, dispute mechanisms that take months or years, becomes irrelevant in real time. Partners diversify hard, diplomatic trust collapses, and scarcity stops being a market condition and becomes a strategic condition. I'm not telling you which path happens. I'm telling you the system is already on the ramp. And the last part is where we end without comfort, because comfort is how this spreads. You don't get a clean ending here, because the central danger in your material isn't the price of aluminum or the ego of any leader or even the one-word refusal. It's the normalization of a world where industrial capacity becomes a weapon, where contracts become suggestions, where supply chains become borders, and where trade policy becomes a stress test you run on your own economy. And once you build that kind of system, it starts to produce one outcome reliably: fear, not panic, not hysteria. Controlled fear, the kind that makes companies hoard, governments retaliate, and allies diversify quietly until the old map stops matching reality. So when you hear about a project delayed, a plant reducing shifts, a price spike on a product that used to be stable, don't treat it like noise. Treat it like signal. The signal that the system is reorganizing itself around scarcity. Subscribe. Stay close to this story, because the next phase isn't going to be announced with sirens. It's going to show up as more one-word moments, more refusals, more reroutes, more quiet decisions that become irreversible by the time you notice them. And in the next video, the question won't be who said no. It'll be how many more times can the system hear no before it breaks something to force yes.